Hi, I'm Patty Dunn with All Done Designs, and I'm going to show you how to line a ready-made jacket that doesn't have a lining. You don't have any kind of pattern for it. I'm going to help you to figure out how to make the pattern for something that's already been made. And I've been told that this little jacket right here is very scratchy. So I'm going to fix this for my granddaughter. Why don't you join me? Okay, I'm starting out with 3 sheets of paper, as long as I need to get the length of the jacket. I have a pencil. I want some weights, pattern weights, and definitely a tape measure, and maybe a straight ruler also. And I'm going to lay this paper down on top of this inside out jacket. So I got it as flat as I can possibly get it. I'm going to make sure that my center front is straight, because there is a little bit of a change that happens sometimes when the fabric's bulky like this. Sometimes it doesn't lay real good, as far as it kind of folds. So I'm going to come down as far as I need, and I'm going to make sure that this is staying in place. So I'm going to put my pattern weights down on that side while I'm working on that. Okay, I'm following the inside of the facing. I'm going to come in and put the seam allowance on it, because I'm going to come right up to this facing. Every garment that you do is going to be different, and actually that seems like that goes over just a little bit, so I'm feeling that going over. And now I'm going to get the neck now. I'm going to follow the neck, and I'm going to get all the way around that collar. This is so bulky, it's kind of hard to tell what is going on. And once I get to the back, it's even worse. Okay, so I'm going to come all the way to the sleeve edge, follow the sleeve opening, now with this I can definitely feel it because it's a bulky fabric. But I turn every once in a while to make sure that I'm on the line. Okay, now what I'm going to do, now that I have the lines done, I'm going to take this off and double check. So I'm going to get my tape measure out. I'm going to measure down, maybe about 4 inches from that neck. And remember, we don't have any seam allowances on, and it's going to be 8.5 inches. So now I'm going to take my pattern, I'm going to go down 4 inches and over, and it's 8.5 inches, just about exactly. I want to make sure that my lines are smooth, so later I'm going to come in with a curved ruler and kind of straighten those lines up a little bit. So now let's double check the center front length. So here's the center front length. This is the inside here. It's 23.5. And I'm going to double check this one, and it's exactly 23.5. Then I'm going to double check my shoulder. My shoulder is 7.25. This shoulder is not quite that wide. So I'm going to have to double check that again, because that's way out there. So we're going to go back, double check that, 7.25. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of that and put it, because I'm almost a ½ inch off. Well, I'm actually, yeah, I'm actually a ½ inch off. So I'm going to take a quarter of that. I think the other thing you're going to need is a seam gauge. I don't know where mine went, but because I've got that little tab there, it makes it kind of hard. So let me see if I can do this a little closer. Okay, so here's my ½ inch. I'm going to take a quarter over there and a quarter over here. Okay, and then I'm going to, with my curved ruler, just help this along just a little bit, just to get that to go straight around there. I mean, smoothly around there. Then I'm going to take this and I'm going to blend that in, because my front was okay here. So now the other thing I want to do is make sure that I am like straight in the front on grain. And so when I want to find where my grain line is, I'm going to match the bottom straight. And then I'm going to make sure that the bottom and the top come all the way up straight. So that's just a little bit off, and that's going to make it straight. Okay? So now I want to straight a grain, which would be, get another ruler, which would be about taking the center here and making sure I have a straight a grain. So now here is this line, here is this line, and here is this bottom line. So we should be okay. Now I want to also double check the length of the opening of the sleeve. So here's my sleeve, and I'm going to walk my ruler around the curve of the sleeve just to make sure, I mean the armhole, just to make sure, and that's 9 1/4. And now I'm going to look at this, and that's exactly right. So I'm good there. You can check anywhere you want. Let's just check right at that arm, at the point where this intersects here, the sleeve and the side seam, and that's 11, and that's exactly right. So I'm doing pretty good here. Now we are going to do the back. So I'm going to lay this flat, and I'm going to find the center of the back, and I'm going to pin it there, and I'm going to find the center of the neck, and that would be to match the shoulders, and I'm going to pin it there. Now I can lay this out flat like this, and I will know where I put this on this side, and I will know where the center back is. So I want to go ahead and pin just a few pins just to make sure that I know that that's the center of the back. Now I'm going to lay the pattern on, and now the back is a little trickier than the front, because the back, if you'll notice this shoulder right here, I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. The shoulder comes forward. So if I just lay this down, do you see the fold up here? Let me pull this down just a little bit more. And do you see the fold is right here? So we need to get all the bottom part of this, and then we're going to add the shoulder so that we're sure we have the length there. So here we go again. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of just feel our way through this back. So I'm going to get the center back. I'm going to follow those pin lines, and the other one, and I'm going to put my weights down so that they stay where they're supposed to. Get some more weights. Now it's bulky, so we want to make sure that we get everything as flat as possible. So here's the neck. I'm going to come with the neck here, and I'm going to just dot the line where the shoulder is. And then I'm going to come around and I'm going to follow the sleeve opening, the armhole, and then I'm going to come down to the side. And I've got the bottom done. Okay, now we need to find out how much is extra up here at the neck. I'm going to see if I can pull you forward to where I'm at the neckline. Okay, so here's the neck edge right here, but it's folded, so I need to make sure that I know how much extra is there, and it's a 1/2 inch, but then it goes down to a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to take this pattern and I'm going to take it off of here now because I've got pretty much everything done. And I'm going to come this way so you can see the lines better. Okay, here is my back neck. You see that? And I'm going to add a 1/2 inch here to a 1/4 inch there, extra. Now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to connect the lines. And then I'm going to need to kind of curve this just a little bit more on my neck, my back neck. So you just run the ruler, you move the ruler until it sort of meets. Okay, and this looks pretty good. Okay, now let's make sure that our back matches, and so I'm going to be sure that I get these measurements the same. So I'm going to measure the center back from seam to seam, which is 28, and I'm going to check this out. That's right there on it. I'm also going to check this shoulder line to the bottom because that was the other thing that I did. Actually, let's do first this neckline. So I'm going to go from this stitching That's the actual stitching to the other side of stitching, not to the seam, because that seam is coming inside. And that's 7 inches. And I'm going to check this, and of course 7 inches, it's got to be half because I took the whole thing. So I want to be sure that I take only half, and it's 3.5 inches. So I'm good with the neck. Now this is center back. It's going to be on the fold. So make sure that you write that goes on the fold. Now we're going to do the sleeve, and don't be afraid because the sleeve isn't any harder than the front or the back. We're going to lay it flat in half like this, and notice that this also has a little vent here or opening, so we're going to make sure that we have that indicated on the pattern also. Also, make sure that when you start with the pattern paper far enough over so you can get the other side on the paper. Okay, so we're gonna lay this down, and we're gonna put our weights down. And we're just gonna follow the seam that's stitched. And I'm going to indicate that opening right there. Okay, now I'm going to indicate the center, and the center, and the center, especially up here. So here is my center top. I'm going to follow this line. Yep, there it goes right there. Okay? Now, I'm going to make sure that I indicate that this is the back, okay? Because there's the back, all right? Now I'm going to turn this over. And I'm going to get the front sleeve. Now, I want to lay this exactly parallel to my fold. Get that out of the way. So, here's my fold, and here's my fold. There. And I want to be sure that I'm all the way up to the top of that shoulder line. And I'm going to get my weights. And don't worry about this width there, because that is going to have to be added anyway, because there is a pleat. So don't fret about that. Just get it close, the width of the bottom, because it's so bulky right there. So you may have a easy sleeve with no extra stuff in it or whatever. Just bear that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I have this right at the center, right there, and right at the center here. And I'm not real concerned about that. And I'm going to now start following again. This is the front. I'm going to start following that line so that I can get that and the side here. And there's the bottom. All right, so there we got it. Now let's double check the sleeve. Here's the sleeve, and I'm going to check the length from the top, the very highest point of this, and I'm just a little bit short of that, but I notice here at the top that my my dome, or whatever you want to call it, is not quite round. So I'm going to round that off And now I'll be okay because I will have it 19 1/4 inches. So with all the bulk of the shoulder seam and everything there, you're probably gonna have a little, you know, problem. So just double check that, make sure that the length is right there, and then I'm going to make sure that the front of the sleeve and the back of the sleeve are the same amount. And so here's the pattern I just drew, and this was the back, and actually I didn't put back on it, but that's the back. And I'm going to measure this, and then I'm going to measure the front open sleeve armhole. And so I'm just going to add, keep going, and that is 19 inches. And so now this has got to be at least that 19 inches plus a little bit to ease in. So let's see how close we are here by working this. 19 inches exactly. Now, the only problem with that is there's not any ease, so I'm just going to add just a little bit of ease right here on the side. That way, when it goes around that dome, it'll have a little extra that I can ease in. So I'm just putting maybe a quarter inch on each side, because you don't want more than a 1/2 inch. This is actually going inside a bulky jacket, so I don't want a whole lot extra. It's going to lay better this way. Now, what about the sleeve? Well, the bottom of the sleeve, the bottom of the cuff, talking about the cuff, is all the way around is 10 1/2 inches from each side without seam allowance. Now, it does have a 1/2 inch pleat. So that's 10 1/2 inches plus a little bit of pleat. And look, I've actually got that in. 10 1/2 inches is 1 inch pleat, and I've actually got exactly how much I need to pleat that. And the pleats right here in the center, if you look at it, it's in the center of the sleeve. It really doesn't matter on the lining what you're going to do, but if you'll just make a 1 inch pleat right there, you should be fine. And this one is like a pleat here and a pleat there, but I'm just going to pleat one pleat right in the center. Now that I have my sleeve finished and I've double checked the measurements, added a little bit, I'm going to double check the center line so that I can make sure that I'm on grain with my lining. And so I'm laying it on my grid, my table that's got a grid, and I'm going to line up that top mark that I made and the bottom mark that I made, and then I'm going to make sure that the bottom is exactly square. So I actually am pretty close. So I'm just going to make sure that that runs along the same line, perpendicular to this line. And this one's off, so don't go by the middle one, because there might have been bulky, something just didn't get right. But this right here and right here is, you're pretty close to being in the center. So then I'm going to make a grain line on here, and so that's going to be right down here, going down this line, following my line. And so there's my grain line. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a seam allowance on this. And I always do a 1/2 inch rather than 5/8 inch, because when you get around curves, it just does not go in as easily. In fact, a 1/4 inch is pretty good to do if you're going to do a lot of curve. But I want to keep it consistent, so I'm going to put 1/4 inch all the way around this, including the top. I'm going to make sure that I know that this is the back, and then I'm going to cut out my pattern and then cut out my lining. Be sure and put seam allowances around all your pattern pieces before you start. I used 1/2 inch seam allowances. It goes around the curves better. So, and also I didn't have enough of one color, so the sleeve is going to be a different color, but it's going to be inside and nobody's going to know the difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the shoulders together, and I'm going to leave it open and put the sleeve on open like this. Now I have turned this inside out onto my mannequin, so the jacket is inside out. I'm putting the lining on to test it out right now, and as you can see, there's a reason why I do not want a whole lot of seam allowance in the neck area there, especially because that has to be tucked under, and the more it goes around that curve, the more curve it has to go under. It is going to be hard to turn that and get all the way around that shoulder. So it's looking pretty good. So I have double checked on that neckline, so I know that that's going to fit around the neck. And now my plan is that I'm going to line the front up, and I'm going to turn it this way, because this has no this has really nothing. It's bulky and it's not going to show a stitch down the front, the middle front. So I'm going to turn this way, and I'm going to make sure that this is where I want it, and I'm going to stitch right along. I've got a pin down here. I'm going to stitch right along this facing, and that is going to be my front line. I'm going to lay this out, pin it down, and then stitch it on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So what's going to happen is I've got to take this neck off that I had pinned, turn it like this. So here's my jacket that's wrong side out, and here is my front. This is the wrong side of the lining. You can see my seams here, and so I'm just going to pin this down, and I have these pinned right now just to check it out. So I'm going to take those pins out, and I'm going to turn it this way. So now when I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch that down only there. Then I'm going to flip it all the way around, and then I'm going to probably, everything else will be hand stitched. And I haven't decided yet whether or not my hem is going to be attached or not. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm right there on that seam line, and when I get to the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch this, and I'm going to stop shy of this area right here, so I can be sure that if I need to trim off my hem or whatever, I can do that. So I just want you to see how I am stitching down. The facing is right here, and I'm stitching down right against that facing. I can feel the edge of the facing, and I had to kind of work my jacket onto the sewing area here. So in order to do that, I had to kind of open it up. But I wanted you to know that on the other side I was stitching, and there's buttons right here. So that's another issue. You want to be sure that you have a presser foot that's narrow enough to go beside those buttonholes or buttons, because it was giving me a lot of trouble there. So I'm just going to come on down, and when I get to the end here, I'm going to stop, because I can always hand stitch right there at the very bottom. I just want to leave a little bit of space, and then once I get done with that, I think I can show you here. I'm going to move this back just a little bit. I've got both sides now stitched. So this is the front. This is the front stitched on both sides. Okay, so now when I turn this, I'm going to just flip it around. So this worked, and I'm so excited to show you that I stitched the neck also. And now I'm going to pull the sleeve through the lining of this lining part here. And if you have a jacket like, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, whatever you're trying to line, you may need to hand stitch this on, because there's not always a way to do this. On this one, there is a place where it doesn't really show if I have another line of stitching here down the front, because it's bulky and it's textured. So I'm just going to bring these two sleeves on through to the right side here. Whoops, I want it on the wrong side so I can work that cuff. And now I could do the same thing on the cuff, but it's a little bit smaller area, so I don't know what I'm going to do with the cuff. I'll probably just hand stitch the cuff, but basically there we are. We have got this pretty much done. Remember, I had a little pleat here, so I'm gonna add that pleat, and then when I get ready to do this sleeve, I'm just gonna hand stitch it. I'm gonna turn it under and catch it right on the edge of this cuff, and I'll just stitch it under. Uh-oh, I forgot to leave it open. Remember, this has a vent, so don't do that. Remember that you need to leave that, mark it or whatever, so I'll take that out, and I'll hand stitch this here, here, and around that, and then I might, depending on how this lays, I might just come up here and tack it at the underarm so that the seam, the hem stays above. And I'll probably just hem it and not stick it. I don't know. I'm going to have to see, because depending on, I don't want it to bunch up, but that'll be also hand stitched on the bottom. And if I leave it floating, I might do that. I probably will. I'll probably just seam this up and then tack it up here so that it stays, so that it doesn't droop under the arm. And probably tack it here at each seam. Here is the jacket finished, and I ended up doing the sleeve by hand and stitching in the vent by hand. So that was all done by hand. I did leave the bottom loose, and I put a little thread tack right there to keep that from floating out. And then I also did a little tack stitch under the seam on the inside so that that would stay good. So it looks good, and even around the other side, and also when it's turned around.